Blerdlines. This is your man Cam. With me, as always, is
Last Action Negro, Cam Squared in the house.
as well as
Darth Coconut, aka Josh.
and keeping us honest,
the professor. Well, I'll be honest today. I am the professor.
You're always honest.
and we are and we are back talking of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. If you haven't been rocking with this, or if you have, Josh and D and Professor D have been recapping each and every episode on our shorts and reels, and so definitely go check those out. It was really, really cool. I like basically once the episode dropped, we had a nice little recap of them talking about it. But we wanted to get all of us together. We've all seen it now. It's all kind of sitting with us, and I think it's helped extend some goodwill back to the Game of Thrones franchise, I will say.
That's a good way to put it.
And so, yeah, like I would say at the end of Game of Thrones, everyone felt kind of ugh. Then House of the Dragon came out, and they're like, and then now
I think everybody felt rage at the end of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, everybody felt like hopping on dragons and going after like Dan and Dave. Like we were all.
It really very nearly ruined the brand.
It did,
Yeah.
and House of the Dragon injected some life into it,
Yes.
and then
it brought it back a little bit.
And obviously
now,
just a little.
And now
I would say House of the Dragon pulled it off of life support, but Knight of the Seven Kingdoms completely resuscitated the brand.
Can I pause real quick? Can we call it House of the Nine Kingdoms, or are we still obligated to call it House of the Seven Kingdoms now?
You're still obligated because most people don't know what you're talking about, and it requires explanation.
Right.
You know what? Go ahead and expand on that, on why it should be Nine Kingdoms.
All right. So technically there were only 6 kingdoms before. We're going back to before the Andals, before when just the first man, we'll say this, the first man in Andals. So you had the North, that was a kingdom. That's one. The Reach, the Westerlands, the Vale, which one am I missing? Oh, the
Dorne.
Stormlands. Well, that's 5 Stormlands, and then Dorne. So those were the 6 in terms of what's on the continent. Okay. They were all 6 independent kingdoms. And even each one of them, the major ones, had their own like petty little houses and kingdoms that fought in, like, that's what the whole Brackens and Blackwoods and the River Low. I'm forgetting the Iron Islands. So there was, the Stormlands is kind of part of the Reach. The Iron Islands and the Riverlands is the other kingdom. So take out the Stormlands and put the Iron Islands and the Riverlands, which at that time were ruled by House Hoare. Hoare being Hoare. Okay, but George R. R. Martin being very cheeky because House Hoare are some whores. Let's just put it like that. Especially the last member, King Black Harren Hoare, who built Harrenhal. So when Aegon came, and Dragonstone was a citadel in the Blackwater Rush that was built by the Valyrians about 2-3 centuries before the Targaryens moved there. But the Targaryens had taken up that as residence. The Doom came to Valyria. It's gone. So basically, Dragonstone as an island becomes its own little citadel, its own little mini kingdom. And especially when Aegon declared that there would be only one king in Westeros, and that would be him in House Targaryen, that essentially made Dragonstone the de facto 7th kingdom. Okay. So, but you also again have, the Stormlands, even though it's a part of the Reach, the Tyrells are not overlords of House Baratheon, but they are, and there's a lot of confusion even there because the Tyrells have 2 houses that technically don't listen to them at all, and they can't enforce them, which is House Hightower of Old Town, that's a part of the Reach, and House Baratheon of Storm's End. Okay. So What did I name? Did I name how many did I name? 8? Was it 8? So then the ninth one that you're referring to would be, what am I missing? We just talked about this yesterday and I had all 9 of them.
The fact that you got 8 is already crazy.
I know I'm missing one that's very significant, but why for the life of me, I don't know why it's not coming. The Crown Lands were created as a result of after the conquest. So after the conquest, the Crown Lands were created, and that's when you get at first it was Aegon's it was just Aegon's Hill where he landed, Aegon's Landing. And then it eventually rose up to be King's Landing. But King's Landing as a city and as a castle and the Crown Lands didn't really develop into what we know it as until midway through King Jaehaerys's reign. Well, Maegor finished the castle. It was finished during his rule, but the ultimate way it looked. So the Crown Lands became, so the Reach, the North, the Westerlands, Dragonstone, the Iron Islands, the Riverlands, and then that's what happened. So, okay, the Riverlands and the Iron Islands get split up, and the Riverlands becomes that other kingdom, not the Crown Lands. It's the Riverlands. The Riverlands, because King Harren refused to bow, Aegon destroys Harrenhal, makes Lord Tully the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, breaks that off, and the Iron Islands are now given to House Greyjoy. Because again, House Hoare ruled both the Iron Islands and the Riverlands. So when those two split, now you get the additional 2 kingdoms that make 9.
And,
Damn.
And at this time during the Night of the 7 Kingdoms, per se, there are 9 kingdoms because Egg points that out. But
yes, most of the world, more. There's actually 9. Yep.
Yeah. So
yeah. I mean,
Dragonstone. I was just going to add, the other thing is that Dragonstone in the show is very, very minimal compared to what it is in the canon, in the book canon. So in the book canon, Dragonstone is an island that has like port villages around it. Like it's not just there's a big castle and that castle sits on a volcano and then there's a beach. Like if you look at the show, there's nothing on Dragonstone besides the Targaryens and depending on what era they're dragons, right? But in the books, there's villages. That's where the dragon seeds come from. They didn't even leave Dragonstone for that. All of those people were found between the villages on Dragonstone, on the island, all of them which they paid obeisance to House Targaryen for hundreds of years, as well as Crackclaw Owl, which is another Valyrian house, House Celtigar, and Driftmark, which is obviously the Valyrians. The Valyrians, excuse me.
I mean, I think the one cool thing about this series, and you had brought this up at the beginning, we were watching the trailer before it even dropped, was that we were going to get a lot of this, like we were going to get to see a lot of precursor to the stuff that we kind of just got glimpses of in the previous spinoffs. So we in Game of Thrones, we saw the end of everything. In House of Dragon, we saw a little bit of the beginning, and then we see that little bit of the middle. And so it was interesting to kind of see it through all 3 different lenses. And also, like, my thing I was watching you guys' recaps and stuff, but also watching it myself. The one thing I did like about the show overall, that it was a lot more like optimistic. It was like the dunk and egg part made it kind of fun. I don't want to say fun because people still got killed and this and that, but it still had a tone of a journey and almost a hero's journey, and also of some of it was a little bit of redemption, also that kind of thing. So it felt to a point where when you're watching anything from Game of Thrones so far, House of Dragon and Game of Thrones, there's always a tinge of kind of despair or of something something evil's lurks. Something's going to happen that's going to, someone's arm going to get chopped off, someone's going to get killed or whatever. Where like even in this one, I had fun watching it because I was like, oh, I like just hanging out with Dunk and Egg and seeing how their journey goes. And that was the part that made it for me fun.
I was going to say to piggyback off that, I don't know if that's the tone of the show is a result of the other two shows, or D can attest to this. Is the book come off kind of lighthearted in comparison to the other stories? So I'm not sure if one affected the other.
Yeah, I think is a little bit of, I think when I read the novella, I did get a sense that Martin was trying to show a different side of his world and using his writing conventions that become bigger in A Song of Ice and Fire. And remember, he wrote these stories, if I'm not mistaken, before he wrote the main series. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he wrote at least one of the Dunk and Egg stories before publishing A Game of Thrones. So some of it, a lot of it is very much bouncing between the tone that we're familiar with, which is the more every page you turn, the character faces danger. Like that's his whole thing, is you should not feel a sense of safety as you read for the characters. Like it shouldn't, like, the whole reason he set up Ned to die the way he set him up was to give this sense that somebody might come in the Durex Machina last minute and save him. He even hinted that with Yoren and with Arya, like there were people around that could have done something, but it doesn't happen. And
actually, before I go, I was going to say, like, when I first, because I didn't really know much about Game of Thrones. Girl I was dating at the time had read the book, was like, yo, you should watch the show. It's pretty good. I was like, all right, we'll see what's up. And when I was watching it, Ned do on all the posters and all the promos, and I'm watching it, and he's like, about to get his head chopped off. I'm like, okay, I know what happens here. This is where someone saves him. We start on this whole other journey, whatever. And when I was literally like shocked because as a viewer of US stuff, I was thinking this was a US show. Now, other shows, Japanese stuff, Korean, all those other ones, anything can happen. But in most American fiction, we have a very specific type of the journey of it and beats. So when he gets his head chopped off, you're like, oh, so anybody can get it. Okay, cool. That set me on that path when I first watched it, because I was not expecting that at all. I didn't know it. So it was definitely like, as the viewer, I was like, yo, they just killed the main dude. What are they going to do?
And it's only in hindsight that you understand the structure that he went with. He gave us Ned as the expected protagonist. He was the proxy protagonist, which is this is the strong, square-jawed white man who is a warrior. He's honorable. He seems to be a good father, a good friend. He has all of those virtues that American storytelling infuses in its protagonist. No comment there, but it infuses in the protagonist in order to build this monomyth of the Joseph Campbell description. So, but what you sort of realize is that it's about the kids, and it's about they are the real protagonists, but that doesn't become apparent until the very end of the Game of Thrones novel and the end of season 1, which is because by that time Ned is dead, Robert is dead. All the heroes that we were told about, legendary from the previous conflict, they're gone. They're literally, I mean, Jaime's still around, but most of them are dead now. So it's only the kids. It's only Jon, Tyrion, Sansa, Daenerys, and Arya. Like, they are the ones who will determine the future, as our previous heroes did. That's exactly what Ned and Robert did. They created a whole new epoch in Westeros, which is the first one in 300 years, Sans Targaryens. Not even Sans dragons, because that had happened 100 and almost 200 years ago. But like the final bell tolling on the Targaryens and dragons in the Valyrian descended dragons in Westeros. So to get back to what we were talking about, it is very much that kind of tone where you get that he's using humor. You get that Egg and Dunk have a little bit of safety in terms of where and we know this because we know that they're historical figures after a fashion, right? So we understand that they're going to be, at the very least, they might be damaged, but they're going to make it to a certain point in their life. So most of the story was until we get to the moment where Arryn does what he does. That's when the dramatic shift in tone happens, because everything changes after that, as you see in the show.
I came into it, I was like, damn, is this going to be like another Attack on Titan? Don't fall in love with any character. But in hindsight, there's a bit of plot armor with the two main protagonists. We know they're going to live because in Game of Thrones, there's been reference to them and how great they were, but small references. And if you've been doing your homework outside of watching the show, they had some history. But my curiosity with the show, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, was like, how deep can we tell this story? How interested I am going to be in this story, because Game of Thrones, the first 5 seasons, and House of the Dragon, the first season, really engulfed me in the political warfare, the dialogue, the motivation of certain characters. And I was like, am I going to really care about Duncan, Tall, and Egg? Like, it just, because also I'm fresh off of watching Grogu and that. And I'm like, all right, is this going to be one of them type of, not comic,
no,
but you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to find those parallels. I'm like, what is this going to be about?
No.
How's this going to
the next story is definitely not the same as the Hedge Knight in terms of its tone. There's still going to be some humorous things, but I mean, the beginning of that story, you're in the middle of several years long plague or something like that. And so the second story immediately establishes we're back in it, man. We're back. We're back in Martin not holding any punches. Yeah, Egg and Dunk will make it through because they have to, but everybody else look out. And the biggest thing is the Blackfire story that's happening in the background, and that continues to happen throughout this short trilogy of novellas where House Blackfire became the biggest antagonist and reason, and the second reason for the Targaryens' ultimate fall. Obviously the third being self-inflicted by King Aerys, but the things with the Blackfires, this is another example of a willful misrule of a Targaryen monarch, of Aegon IV, the Unworthy, who's referenced in the show, but he's not talked about. And that one, he would have been Egg's great grandfather, because he was King Daeron's father. And he's the reason why the Blackfires rose up. He's the reason he cast doubt on his own son, King Daeron, Prince Daeron's birth. Like he started a rumor that it was his brother's son, because his brother had slept with his sister wife. And as a result of that one lie and him continuing to carry it on, eventually it gave pretext for Daemon Blackfire to rise up and try to take them out. So that happens in the back several years, much like Game of Thrones begins 13, 17 years after a major rebellion. The same thing is for these 3 novel trilogy. And just as Robert's Rebellion is important from the beginning of that story to all the way to the end, it gives context to a lot of the mysteries, a lot of the things that we're seeing. It all began it exploded during Robert's Rebellion. It began even before that, similar to the same thing with the Dance of the Dragons. Remember, we talked about this, Cam, how if you really look at it, that encaptures that conflict didn't even have its first fight until there were 4 or 5 generations involved. And the same thing with the Blackfires. It didn't plateau until there were a couple Baelor and Makor and Daron's sons are now older. They're like adults. Damon Waters, or Blackfire, has been building his house, and he's got like 8 kids himself. Those Targaryens are they're like jackrabbits, but dragons. But they have a bunch of them. At least two of them might come out like lizard and with wings but most of them come out very beautiful, the opposite of that. But that's because that magic blood is tainted. And again, they couldn't do anything but fall when they did. And for most of us who's, when you see the biggest character who's going to have the most impact when he enters the fray and when he comes on camera for the first time is Bloodraven. That's the one. That's the person. That's the character who is literally lives all the way through Game of Thrones, like to the Game of Thrones era. And he's basically George R. R. Martin's version of Gandalf. He is literally the Gandalf of the story. He's the one that's been talking to Bran and Jon, and there's even hints that he was communicating with Euron, who is basically the Sauron of the story. For all you who saw Euron in Game of Thrones, that was like Jack Sparrow's little dumb cousin compared to what George R. R. Martin is doing with Euron in the book. Euron Crowseye, the one who has a full, another change in House of the Dragon. They gave Aegon and said that they had an heirloom of Valyrian steel armor. You just wrecked about 7-8 books of world building with that one line, because the whole thing is that nobody, not the Targaryens, the only thing the Targaryens were able to do is reproduce Valyrian steel and rework some of the fire magic with the dragons and work stone and things like that. They did not know. They did not have the ability to do some of the other magical works that the Valyrians were known for, including making full-scale armor. They didn't have none. Euron is the only character in the 300-400 years since the doom of Valyria who has a full-scale armor of Valyrian steel, armor from helmet to his feet. And that is meant to be very telling to us, because he claims that he went to the Doom. Nobody's gone to the Doom and come back and survive, but he says he went, and he's got a full suit of armor. But he also claimed he went to a Shire, and there's a couple connections there. So bottom line is, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms really did a great job in terms of bringing in some of that background lore and allowing it to sit on the background and not be too disruptive for the viewing audience who isn't very familiar with it. And that's not an easy thing to achieve. And I think they did a good job at it.
Like Cam, I had reservations right up until the panel at New York Comic-Con, where the conversations that were had on stage, and the fact that George R. R. Martin felt like it was important enough for him to be there at the panel. I think it was his first time at Comic-Con, if I'm not mistaken. The fact that he was there and sort of wanted to give it his personal stamp told me everything that I needed to know about it. Because I mean, I don't think he was ever at Comic-Con for all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. And they had a panel, I want to say most of the years. I don't think every year, but they had a panel most of the years at Comic-Con. And so George R. R. Martin feeling like it was necessary and proper for him to be there, I was like, all right, that's the seal of approval. I'm good.
He did attend some of that stuff during Game of Thrones, though. I'm pretty sure he attended some of it. So I remember seeing some of the panels and things where he was a part of. Maybe not New York Comic-Con.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, there was a whole big thing about the fact that this was his first Comic-Con, his first New York Comic-Con. Thank you. But yeah. Like him putting his stamp on that to me meant more than anything anybody on stage would say. And it was a different take on the Game of Thrones world. where the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, where there's a lot of humor injected into it, unexpectedly, in a world that really ain't got ain't nothing funny, ain't nothing sweet in that world. And almost every season a couple people die, and die tragically, horribly, in gut-wrenching ways. And sure, you had a little bit of that with Baylor dying, but for the most part, everybody else pretty much kind of stuck around. And while there were some gut-wrenching things that happened because it's Game of Thrones, and it wouldn't be Game of Thrones without that, you still got you got a really heartwarming story, and you really got a story that allowed Dunk and Egg to sort of endear themselves to the viewer in a way that characters in the Game of Thrones world kind of just don't otherwise. And shout out to HBO PR for giving us screeners. Thank you very much, folks. We hope to get more. Please send more. But yeah, it was say again?
For 4 people next time.
Word, for 4 people this time. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was all in all, I'm 10 out of 10, man. I have no complaints about season 1 at all. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Especially, as always, viewing this thing through D'Angelo's lens, considering that, he's as steeped in that world as anyone I've ever met. And sort of through his eyes, getting the sort of stamp of approval, and not just the stamp of approval like, oh, it's good, I like it. More like, okay, this is why this works. This is why this worked so well. This is why this was good. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had no issues with it. And I am amazingly more stoked for season 2 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms than I am for the upcoming season of House of the Dragon.
And Cam, I'll let you bring up the rear.
Hey, overall, it was a good series. I was engaged throughout the whole 6 episodes series. I cared about certain characters. I wanted to watch them develop, see this quote unquote hero's journey. Although episode 6, there was one small gripe, and we talked about this in the episode 6 recap, the choice of music selection that totally took me out of the whole scene. I was like, why is there jazz playing? Like, I thought I was watching, even though I was watching it on HBO Max, I thought it was a bootleg copy. I was like, what
agree,
is
agree.
So,
agree. Yeah, the jazz definitely took me out. Yeah.
It did until I saw Lionel, and then that's where I was like, okay, that makes sense.
It just took me out, and it was a minor, very minor gripe, but it was a very odd, interesting choice of music. Overall, it didn't disrupt the whole series as a whole. It didn't.
No.
It didn't make me think any different from episode 6. It was a good bow tie on that show, and I'm looking forward to seeing season 2 and how they're going to develop that. I'm going to probably, more than likely, pick up all 3 books and read them in succession, and
Same.
then I'll have a better understanding. And so when D'Angelo does come back, when we come back with season 2, I'll be better versed in comparing the novel with the show, and we can have some more back and forth, because obviously D'Angelo is a resident professor, and I feel like I'm just piggybacking, but
for real,
at the same time, it does give me a different level of enjoyment watching it, because I don't know what happened in the novella, what upsets D'Angelo. It doesn't upset me as much because I'm not familiar with it. So there's something to be said about that, but I will be a little bit more prepared for season 2.
We talked about the brother versus brother, the kinslaying thing. And I think that this story was set up to really highlight that in many, many ways. And even in the relationship between Dunk and Egg, with Dunk becoming Egg's chosen brother. And we know that that's a theme in the story, because in Game of Thrones, what does Robert tell Ned? I never loved my brothers. You were the brother I chose. I know that's a bad thing for a man to say, but it's true. I didn't love my brothers. You were the brother I chose. And so that's a big, and even in small ways, we got it. What did Makar tell Egg when he says, I hate Arryn, that the gods say that we should love our brothers. And we don't know it at the time. Well, of course I knew because I read, but most of the people who are watching don't know that this is foreshadowing the death of Baelor at the hands of Makor. And, I love the way it's happens. Not that Baelor dies, but the fact that it was such an egregious accident. And if you go back and watch, you'll see it happening exactly at the moment where Dunk is dragging Aryan to yell that he yields to stop the fighting, because he was saying it in such a way that the rest of them couldn't hear. They were still fighting and they were still trying to kill each other. And if he had just said, I yield, and yelled it, his uncle would not have been killed by his father. And his father would not be a shamed man for the rest of his life, even though he will eventually become king. And I hope for the future seasons that we get. Normally, I wouldn't want flashbacks in this story, but I wouldn't mind seeing flashbacks of young Baelor, same actors, not too much young, but Baelor and Makor during the Redgrass Field, or when they were fighting in the Blackfire. Because we're not going to see any more Sam Spruill anymore, because and he was excellent as Makor, because they don't appear in those next stories. So.
And shout out to Bertie Carvel too, because that dude's he won 2 Laurence Olivier Awards, and I love watching I love watching Game of Thrones, because you see actors that you might have seen passing somewhere else, mm-hmm. or maybe you might have never seen, and then you go look him up and you're like, this dude is hella dope. So him doing this is what? You're doing a TV show at your level? But yeah, he killed it. His presence as Baelor was yo, you felt it right when he came in, all the way until when he passed. And it was left a mark on it. Kind of when Pedro Pascal, when he was in Game of Thrones, right? His presence from the beginning of the scene.
It's funny you brought him up, because technically Baelor should look more like that, with the olive skin, because he's Dornish. He's Dornish.
Yeah,
his marriage is Dornish.
Right.
Yeah, because that marriage is what brings Dorne in, when Dorne officially becomes one of the 7 kingdoms and begins to swear obedience to the Iron Throne, even though it's more ornamental, because they still do whatever the hell they want, and they keep the prince titles and all that stuff. But that happened with King Daeron, and he married one of the Martell princesses, and as a result, Makor, Baelor, all of them are born, and that sealed the rift. So basically, Dorne was all about Baelor. When the Hammer and the Anvil song is about him bringing an army, having an army of all of Dorne at his back when he arrives on the battlefield, and then Makor having an army of some of the other loyalist houses from Westeros. But the most impressive, and this is the first time that Dorne rode down on behalf of a Targaryen. So it was the imagery was iconic. So yeah, it would be nice to see more. And that's why Baelor is the biggest example of that road not traveled theme in his storytelling, where Baelor getting struck down, boom, a great Targaryen king, the person who could have restored the dynasty, all that gone.
Yeah, and it's crazy, because George is good at creating these characters that you instantly just latch onto, and then all of a sudden, or on the flip side, makes you really, really hate them, so that when they finally get their comeuppance, it's super satisfying.
Yeah. You always question their choices, because you question. I mean, obviously, Baelor did the right thing, but Lionel was correct. He didn't risk anything, and that's the irony of his death. Is he should not have died. Yep. He should not have died.
He had a plan not to get hit, and was the one that ultimately got hit
and got blocked.
Well, he was one of the 3 people that died in that battle. So,
yeah,
there were. We got to remember there were other deaths on Dunk's side,
right?
Yeah,
but yeah, you're right. That's the one legacy I would say George will always have, is that, right? The moment you start to get liking of a certain character, you better watch out. They save a kitten, arm getting chopped off.
The road not traveled for that person. It's because it always makes you wonder, like, if they just made a different choice.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think that speaks to George R. R. Martin's writing. You know, it's not just death for death's sake when characters get off. It usually alters the entire world or a portion of that world in a way that makes you like Dee was saying, you know, like what would have happened? What would have been if this character lived? Because their death is almost always consequential. I can't think of one character in all of the Game of Thrones narrative in that world where a death didn't present like doesn't create a fork in the road.
Yeah, I mean, the Targaryens didn't even want to be there. And King Daeron now has to hear the news that at this rinky-dink tourney at Ashford, his son and heir is dead at the hands of his own, as his younger. Like, Daeron was probably going insane when he got this news. How? Over a head? What? Like, he probably called Egg for an audience. It's like, what were you doing? Like, what's going on, little man? Like, what were you doing?
Yeah.
Like, what was this all about? I could imagine he was just so, like, confused by hearing the news of what was going on, because they were only there to show that they were
face.
still to show face, to show face. That's it.
Freaking George does it every time.
Bastard.
All right, well, thanks for rocking with us. As you can tell, the Game of Thrones-ness is strong in these parts. And hope you guys enjoyed the recaps. So if you have just a quick review. And like you said, we always like talking Game of Thrones, so that's always a good thing. But we are semi-excited about House of Dragon season 2, 3. Semi. You'll see another one when we talk about how semi we are.
We like talking about Game of Thrones lore when it's good.
Yes, there you go.
As does everyone. Like I feel like the universe thrives when there's good material put out. You know, that's almost should go without saying. But the fact that we got season 6 through 8, and the fact that, you know, everything has wavered so heavily since season 1 of House of the Dragon, you know, it's not a given that you're going to get that just because the source material is top tier, that the adaptation is going to be what it should, what is going to be reflective of the source material.
And I like that this is extended a little bit of goodwill on the Game of Thrones side, that it helps us feel a little better. So
for now.
But as always, thanks for rocking with us. Like, subscribe, share, tell a friend, comment, negative, positive. And shout out to the folks that correct us if we do get something wrong, or maybe we mix something up. Oh, again, that's always
indeed.
Yes,
very much welcome. But be careful. Do not tug the dragon's tail too much.
Wow.
I'm warning you. You've been warned. You only get one.
I'm guessing that's to the haters. That's to the negative commenters, I guess.
That's in general.
Just come to Discord and then we can talk about it. So.
Yeah, really.
Exactly.
You come to Discord, you're really going to get it.
Wow.
Okay.
And on that note, this is Blerdlines. We out.